Joining us, and we're delighted to have him back, is Yanis Varoufakis, economist, former Greek finance minister, prolific author, and today secretary of DiEM25, the left-wing European alliance.
I think I'm in a very small minority of people who don't simply dismiss Trump as a madman or Trump's team as madmen. I think they have a plan. Trump 2.0 has a plan that Trump 1.0 lacked. It is nothing short of using his tariffs to initiate, and here I quote, a controlled disintegration of the world economy. By the way, this is not a recent quote. It's not an expression by one of his lackeys, but it's the expression used by Paul Volcker to describe what the United States was up to with the Nixon shock of the 1970s, which he himself, Paul Volcker, was to complete a couple of weeks after he made that statement at the University of Warwick in 1978. 2 weeks later, he was the chairman of the Fed. Very soon after he became chairman of the Fed, he doubled and then trebled American interest rates. Looking back at that history of the 1970s, the Nixon shock, this is what Trump is looking to do, to bring about his own major controlled disintegration of the world economy. Back in the 1970s, the idea was simple. Through tumult in foreign exchange markets, following the end of the fixed exchange rates, a massive devaluation of the dollar, a huge increase in interest rates, and last but not least, a sadistic diminution of real American hourly wages. The Nixon-Kissinger-Volcker plan was to build a brand new, even go as far as to say, ostentatious global surplus and deficit recycling mechanism. The American trade deficit would expand and work like an outsized Hoover vacuum cleaner that sucked into the United States territory the net exports of Germany, of Japan, and later China. And how would this be paid for? Well, by means of a tsunami of dollars that the German, Japanese, and Chinese capitalists would send to New York to buy American debt, government debt, shares, not too many, controlled, and of course, massive infusions into real estate. Now, that was the plan, and it worked. Okay, so that's the Nixon shock and what followed. Trump's men, and it's men, Grace, it's men, it's only men. I haven't seen a single woman in that team. And they're not to be underestimated. They're quite smart thinkers, some of them. People like Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, the chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, they are quite formidable, could be malevolent, but formidable planners. They look at Nixon's legacy of how Nixon's team changed the world through a careful, albeit brutish, controlled disintegration of the world economy, and they want to repeat it. What is their aim now? The aim is the same as Nixon's, to turn a United States weakness into greater United States hegemony. That weakness was a trade deficit. Today, Trump's men think that the Nixon strategy no longer works, or it is precarious in the way it works, that the trade deficit, whose expansion helped the Americans, the American rentier capitalists in particular, grow their hegemonic power, that trade deficit now has become, in their minds, too large, and they are scared of the so-called Triffin dilemma. Maybe I should explain. The moment when the global supply of dollars, of the reserve currency, relative to the American output, to the output of the country that produces that currency, is so large that anything can trigger an unstoppable sell-off of the reserve currency. They are very scared of that. So they are planning to push it into the future to prolong American hegemony through the Trump shock, which, of course, Trump has just described as Liberation Day. And it's not just a day. It's going to be a long and arduous period. So what is the particular aim? It is twofold. On the one hand, what they want to do is engineer a large, long-term devaluation of the dollar, while at the same time, preserving the dollar's reserve currency status. Now, some may say that this is a contradiction. Can you devalue the dollar and maintain its hegemony? Well, yes, you can. This is at least what they think. If, for example, they are successful in strong-arming foreigners, take the Japanese, for instance, or German capitalists, strong-arm them into selling their dollars, the stashed dollars, and to buy with it 30-year long-dated US treasuries, or crypto for that matter, especially stable coins that are dollar-denominated, then they will have reduce the value of the dollar because dollars would have been sold. Their supply would have increased, but it would be dollar-denominated long-term assets that would have been purchased. Now, the question is, how do you strong-arm the Germans, the Chinese, and the Japanese, and the French, and the Saudis to do this? To use their dollars in order to devalue it, and at the same time not shift to the yuan, not shift to the euro, not shift to the yen. Well, that's where Liberation Day comes. It is, he slaps huge tariffs all around, uniformly, and then on a one-to-one basis isolates Britain, Germany, France, Japan, China, and negotiates with them and says, you don't like the tariffs? Okay, here's what you do. You have this stash of dollars, this is what you buy with it. And then I will reduce the tariffs as your sell-off of American dollars for assets that I will point out for you, not that you decide on your own, causes the US dollar to devalue. Because if you really want to increase American exports and reduce American imports, it doesn't matter whether you better actually to succeed in devaluing the dollar than to slapping tariffs. But in the end, he doesn't mind that much. The countries that will accept his deal will see lower tariffs. The ones who don't, like China probably, will not see lower tariffs. I think that is the way they're thinking. So let's just allow me to conclude. There are two possibilities. One is that the Trump shock, Liberation Day, works. What happens then? Well, if it works, the moment of truth will come because Donald, will have to choose his poison. If the trade deficit of the United States shrinks as a result of the Trump shock of Liberation Day, which is what he wants, claims to want, well, then he will have very irate, very angry financiers and realtors in New York, in Miami, in California. Why? Because the US realtors and financiers benefit as we speak from the enormous trade deficit of the United States, which becomes the dollar stashes of the Germans and the Japanese, which then travel to New York and go to the realtors, to the real estate sector of the United States and to the financial sector of the United States, explaining their asset price inflation, which they love. So if it works, he's going to have to choose between betraying his mates, the realtors and financiers, or the working class that will have benefited from jobs that will be migrating back to the United States. Well, guess whom he's going to betray. There's no doubt that, like with every best laid plan, the Trump plan, the Liberation Day, Trump shock, call it what you may well fail. But to dismiss this Liberation Day, Trump shock plan, what's underlying that as the doings of a wayward mind that can't escape from a brown paper bag, in other words, to belittle and assume that Donald Trump is a fool who doesn't know what he's doing, that is a major error which may come back and bite us.